Good evening, everybody. If I could ask you to please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. If you didn't get a chance to sign in and grab your materials, please do so. And I will turn it over to, who's going to take this one? Okay, Mr. Carlson.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to do some follow-up from the last meeting, a couple of things. One was there was an email request with some questions, and I thought it would be better to explain give you the answers here, and then this way, if there's follow-up questions, it's a little easier for dialogue instead of just over email. So this email had come from Mr. Insera, and he said, okay, I'll just read it, and I'll go question by question. At the last meeting, we found that $3 million was being proposed for capital projects in next year's budget. Is that $3 million budgeted for specific projects, or is it just earmarked for capital spending? So, well, one thing, so since our last meeting, we had a Board of Education meeting, and at that meeting, we went over the tax cap calculation, the same as what we had done here. And the board decided they wanted to lower the capital projects in next year's budget to $1.5 million instead of $3 million. So what that does is, if you remember, when we did the tax cap calculation at our last meeting, it was 3.64%. Now it's 2.78%. So that's something that the board decided to do. So that's that. However, that $1.5 million, as of today, it's not earmarked for specific projects. We do have to earmark it by the time the budget is voted on by the public. So we have to, like when the budget brochure goes out, the budget newsletter, it's got to be in there. When we do that, we need to be, I hate to say it this way, but intentionally vague on that. And what I mean is, like, if we think, okay, we're going to do bathrooms for $400,000, we're going to do some asbestos abatement for $200,000. Well, the bathrooms are at Jolinas, the asbestos is at Murphy. We're going to do some work, whatever, structural something at Setauket for another $400,000, and so on. If we list it that way within the budget newsletter, then we're limiting ourselves to how much building aid we can get on any one project. So if we say we'll do $400,000 for bathroom renovations at Jolinas, then no matter what, if for some reason we need to spend more than that $400,000 on bathroom renovations at Jolinas, we're not going to get building aid more than the $400,000. So what we would do is we would list all the projects, and for a total of $1.5 million. So that way, if it turns out one project, because we don't know exactly how much they're going to cost, we have to go out to bid once the budget is approved by the voters, then the architect can draw up the plans and specs, which takes a while. It's not just, sit down for 20 minutes and draw them up. I mean, a spec book on even a small project is, hundreds of pages, and all the architectural drawings and all of that. And he can't do that work before there's voter approval on the project. So that has to wait till after the budget vote. So then, when that's done, it gets submitted to the state education department, and it can literally be up there for 6 to 9 months, just sitting in a line, waiting for its turn to be reviewed. And then, when we finally get the project approval from them, then we go out to bid. So work that we're talking about included in this coming up year's budget, the work itself will be done at the earliest summer of 2026. So we're doing an estimate as to how much the projects will cost. So we don't know exactly what they'll cost. It'll go out to bid. Now, we have an idea of what they'll cost. Our architect can do, cost estimates the same way that the contractors do. But if it turns out that next summer, and this could apply in any year, when we go out to work, bid on a particular project, we could have bid budgeted $800,000, let's say, for that project, and the low bid comes in at $2.2 million, we might say, well, forget it. It's way out of what we had earmarked for that, so forget it, we're going to reject all the bids. We'll revisit that project later on, in which case, now we can use that money for one of the other projects that we had listed. So, that's why we list it that way in the budget newsletter. Okay, so next thing. Carmine, I'm going through the questions that you had emailed. I only got through the first one so far. And by the way, since our last meeting, at the Board of Education meeting that we had, I went over the tax cap calculation at that meeting, same as I had done here, and the board decided to lower the capital projects in next year's budget to $1.5 million. So that means the tax cap next year, instead of the 3.64%, is now 2.78. Okay. Okay, just wanted to make sure you know. Okay. Can that money be spent on anything else in the budget? No, including by an action of the board to reallocate it, no. And it's because it's the exclusion from the tax cap, that's why it can only be used for that. And the reason they did that way, the state legislature, when they put the tax cap law into effect in the first place, was so school districts wouldn't have to choose between taking care of their buildings and educational programs.
Can you lump the design cost or the design fee into capital budget, or no?
It does. So we pay that out of, yeah, so we get the aid on that as well, on the architectural fees. And if there's engineering fees and dependent on the nature of the project, there might be testing fees, like if it's an asbestos abatement project, for example. The environmental company that we use to monitor the asbestos piece, and they do the testing afterwards to make sure it's clean, that's also, all those costs are aidable. If we do not have funds earmarked for capital improvements in the budget this year, but an emergency arises, such as the flooding at Nascaig or roof collapse at Setauket, where do those repair funds come from? So, and for those projects, what budget lines did those funds come from? So last school year, we had the ceiling collapse at Setauket. So the total cost to repair that was about $2.1 million. So for that one, we had $1.4 million in last year's capital projects line in the budget. So we applied that whole $1.4 million towards that. And then the board passed a resolution to take the other $700,000 from reserves. So that one, we will get building aid on it, normal way, 15 years. We were trying to get it all at once because it was an emergency, but the state, they wouldn't buy that. Not that it wasn't an emergency, but that it wasn't an event caused it. If a plane crashed on the building, or a tree fell, or lightning struck, or something like that, an event, that would have been different. But we are getting the building aid over the 66% of that over the 15 years. Nascaig, the flooding at Nascaig is a little different. That money, that's not capital project money, because that's not a capital project. Some of the work that we had to do would qualify as a capital project, such as replacing some of the controls and things for the boilers and some of the electrical panels. That would qualify as a capital project, but the vast majority of all of the work that we had to do there was flood mitigation, the damage from the flooding. So that would, on the one hand, it wouldn't have qualified as a capital project anyway, but we will be getting FEMA reimbursement for that. We've been working with FEMA. They've been very helpful with that, and they are, FEMA is actually optimistic that we would get even more than the 66% we would have gotten as a capital project. So, and they're pretty optimistic that it won't take 10 years like Sandy did, or 8 years like Sandy did. So for that project, what we'll be doing, we're not done with all the work yet. When we finish all of that, then we'll have a resolution for the board to pull that money from reserves to pay for that, because we don't have that money anywhere in the budget, right? There's not enough spare, if you want to say it that way, in the budget to pay for that. So we'll use reserves to pay for that. When the FEMA reimbursement comes in, that'll go right back into reserves to replace it. I mentioned the funds on those incidental projects. List of revenues used for this year's budget. I'm working on the revenues now for the coming up year's budget. I should have that for you next week. By the way, we're meeting each of the next, counting tonight, 4 weeks in a row. I hope next week to have the revenues for you, as well as the first draft of the line item budget. We plan on giving the first draft of the line item budget to the board next Wednesday, and then we're meeting next Thursday. So that's the anticipated revenues for last year. Okay. List of the 22, 23, 23, and current fund balance. That's one of the handouts tonight, several years of fund balance in the different categories. So remember, fund balance is like an umbrella term. It includes all of the reserves and what's called unreserved, right? So unreserved is what's typically called fund balance, is really the unreserved fund balance. The reserves are still fund balance, but it's reserved fund balance. So that's on that sheet, that's a handout. Did we satisfy the New York State requirement to refund the reserves that were borrowed during COVID? No, we're actually in year 3 of 5 of doing that right now. And what do we anticipate this coming up year's appropriated fund balance to be? Probably the same as this year, $3.5 million. But when we go over the revenues, either next week or the week after, we'll have that number. I would have loved to decrease that some, but with the health insurance increase that we're seeing, as you saw. I don't know if we'd have the ability to do that this coming up year. So that's those questions. I just wanted to go over the sheet that was passed out too at the end of, when we were leaving the last meeting. Information from the State Ed Department. What they call funding transparency, which is really anything but transparent. But I just want to go over some of those because the information can be very misleading. So that's that one that says on the top line, school district spending info, and from New York State SED 22-23 data. So first of all, in the line 3 village total budget, it says $322 million. Our budget's not $322 million. In fact, in that year, our total spending on that report was, and I put the, where this info comes from the State Ed Department is one of the handouts too. So it's actually $232 million, not $322 million. You'll see that in the third page back towards the total expenditures, $232 million, not $322 million. And then looking at some of the other districts, like Comac, now if the column spent per pupil, the next column over from total budget spent per pupil, it's rounded to the nearest thousand, which is fine. Comac's is 28,000. Actually, theirs is about 29,780 something. So if you're going to round to the nearest thousand, I would say it should be 30,000. But okay, then go down a little bit. Now in the high school info, various high schools, Half Hollow other than the school name, the students column, Half Hollow Hills High School West doesn't have 1,955 students. It's got 1,055. Should be 1,055, not 1955. And then to go to Ward Melville High School, the top line, now go over to the right, counselors, we do not have 20 counselors at the high school. We have 11, and that's, so in the handout, the first couple of pages are district-wide, and then it goes to the Ward Melville High School section. And actually, on that last page on here, for Ward Melville, our counselors are 11, and social workers 3, not 12. And, so, oh, and then I also gave, I want to go, well, I'll come back to per pupil expenditures in a minute, because I want to explain something about the way the state does it. I gave, just for informational purposes, so this page, that's one of the handouts, is from a budget presentation from the Garden City School District from a year or two ago. And this isn't a, every district does their own thing, right? And it's not that there's a right way and a wrong way, and everyone's a little different. So Gardens, and I picked this one because Garden City's on this list to compare us to. Because this is right from one of their budget presentations on their website. So it's a point of pride for them to say, they spend less than just about everybody else. So, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that, but that's not us. We don't go out and say, you know what, you parents here, don't worry, we spend less than anybody. It's just not us. Now, some people don't like that. Some people would rather we spend less and less and less, but our philosophy, thank you, yes, has always been, we want to provide more services to kids. So it costs more. So, we don't say, no, what are you talking about? We don't spend any more than any other district. So, yeah, we do. I get that. But, like I said, I mean, in Garden City, and good for them, it's a point of pride that they spend less. Now, here's a piece of information that maybe by itself means nothing, maybe it does to you. So if you took all of our kids, right, school-age kids, not counting special needs kids that go to like out-of-district schools like BOCES or a private school setting like a DDI or something like that, the percent of Three Village kids that attend a parentally placed private school, like a parochial school or some other, Laurel Hill, for instance, something like that, where they pay tuition for their kids to go. 3.9% of our kids are in a parentally placed private location that their parents pay tuition for. In Garden City, it's 11.3%. Why? I have no idea. Maybe there's other reasons to it. Maybe people say, well, you spend less than everybody else. I want my kid to go to a school where they're doing more, and I'm willing to pay for it. But I have no idea.
Could I interrupt for 1
Sure,
second?
of
So
course.
part of the reason probably for that, for Garden City, we don't transport, because of distance with our transportation to some of the private schools, like St. Anthony's and Lehigh High and Friends Academy. Garden City, because of its proximity, is a lot closer to those. Sacred Heart is right in Garden City. Shamana is right down the road in Mineola. Lehigh, Friends Academy are right near there as well. So that's, St. Anthony's is in Huntington, but, closer to there than we are to St. Anthony's in
Yeah.
our direction.
So just so in case anybody's curious, so the state minimum to transport kids out of district is, the minimum, the minimum maximum mileage that we could put is 15 miles, right? We can't say, you know what, we're not going to transport any kids to private schools more than 10 miles away. We can't do that. It can't be less than 15. It could be more, though, if the community votes on it. That's not a board action, that's a community vote. And there are some districts, and I'm pretty sure, wouldn't swear to it, that both Sachem and Middle Country transport to St. Anthony's.
They do.
I thought so, yeah. It's more than 15 miles, but their community voted to say, we want to transport, even if maybe their mileage limitation is 20 or 25 miles. I don't know.
Brentwood's is 25.
Okay. Ours is 15. So that's why we don't transport, for instance, to St. Anthony's. It's more than 15 miles away. That doesn't mean none of our kids go there.
No.
They can either get driven. Some of the parents, you probably know some of the parents, some of them get together and they hire either a bus themselves, some of them take the train, right from here to Stony Brook, and then St. Anthony sends a bus to the Huntington train station to get kids. So anyway, any piece of information like that, by itself doesn't necessarily mean anything. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Just throwing it out there. To go back to the per pupil expenditures for a second, and here's one thing, the way the state ed department puts the information out, and it can be very, as I said, it can be very misleading. So, that's this page where I have the thing about the exclusions. So, they don't just take the budget, the total budget divided by enrollment and say, here's the amount per pupil. That's not what they do. They have this whole convoluted formula that they do, and including, they exclude, the formula includes a lot of adjustments to total spending. And they call those exclusions, because they want to get, the theory, I suppose, is they want to say, well, what's the cost of instruction for each of those schools per student? So they exclude transportation, charter school enrollments doesn't apply to us, tuition for other districts, debt service payments, which, okay, I suppose, but other is also payments to BOCES. Now, here's where that really can throw things off. If you, here, oh, by the way, back to the report from the State Ed Department, it says that on, somewhere in here it says, oh, here, on the, second page, but back of the page number, the second page, which would be, I guess, page 4, what other spending is not included in the per pupil amounts. Other exclusions include expenditures such as tuition for students attending BOCES full-time, blah, 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 blah. That's the big one. So and this was, I just did a hypothetical just to show you how that can really skew things. So, next page, example of how exclusions could impact PPE. All right, so first district, 12 kids in the whole district, and $600,000 in spending, all right? But of those 12 kids, 2 go to BOCES, and they cost $200,000 each for the year, which is not an unusual number. It sounds like, oh, that's an outrageous number. Well, it's not, unfortunately. So they cost $200,000 each. The way the State Ed Department does the per pupil expenditure, they take the total of $600,000, subtract out the $400,000 that district pays to BOCES to come up with a total spending of $200,000, and there are 10 kids because there's 12 kids total, but that includes the 2 going to BOCES. So they divide the $200,000 by the 10 students at $20,000 per pupil. Now you have another district, exact same situation, right? 12 kids, $600,000 in total spending, but those 2 kids, 2 special needs kids, stay in a district program. District runs a program for them. You can make and it costs the same exact amount as what they would have paid to send them to BOCES. And you could even make the argument that they're actually getting more of a program because they're not being transported so far. And just so you know, the transportation piece of that makes up a significant part of that $200,000 in spending per student. So that if that money went more towards a program for those students. So that, by those kids staying in district, that means all of the spending, the entire $600,000 is counted as district spending. And now you have the $600,000 divided by the 12 students, and it would say $50,000 per pupil. But if all you saw was the bottom number, and you saw this district was $20,000 a pupil, and this one was $50,000, you'd say, what the hell is going on? Why are you spending 2.5 times more per pupil than the next door district? But in this situation, you're not. Spending exactly the same. It just, the way the State Ed Department does the per pupil expenditures, it makes it, it's supposed to be transparency, it makes it anything but transparent. So, any questions about that?
So for that matter, for our sake, in Three Village, which we have prided ourselves on this for years, even back when Sam and I were hired here in 1996 together, we have traditionally kept more of our students in-house than we have sent out to BOCES. And remember, in special education programs, it's least restrictive environment. So if we can do it in-house, as opposed to sending out, we're supposed to be educating them here. Now, the state is actually on its ear about this right now and is going after districts about them sending too many of their students out of district. And back 3 years ago when we were doing the discussions on the strategic plan, we made the comments about Jericho, and I had a long conversation with Hank Grisham, who's the retiring superintendent, and Jericho has been there for 25 years. And he said when he started there, they had a large percentage of kids that were being sent out to BOCES, and he prided himself that he has reduced that down to about 8% of their population now is only sent out to BOCES. We are far below that. We are less than 1% of our population in total, I believe, going out to BOCES at this point in time. So that's a significant difference. So when you look at those numbers, case in point, if you take a look at Jericho spending and you look at that chart that you see what they're spending, that's where this example is really comes home to roost when we're looking at this. But as we were accused of several years ago when we used to put the PPE in the budget, the presentation for that, there's multiple ways to measure per pupil expenditures.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you see like the Garden City thing, and you know, they got the information from, so if you, on this with that they had put, and this was, I don't think it was either last year or the year before, I forget, where it says information source, Quest R3 BOCES. That's one of the BOCES upstate. It used to be Rensselaer, Columbia, Greene County BOCES, and it's called Quest R3 now. They have a state aid planning service there that most school districts in the state belong to, and they provide various information, and that's where these numbers had come from. But if I guarantee, whatever year you look at, you would not be able to find these numbers anywhere on some report that the state ed department does. There's all different ways, what's included, what's not included in per pupil spending, per pupil cost, not just in what's included in the spending piece, that's the numerator, but in the denominator as well. Well, how many kids are we talking about? And it's not just, well, is it the enrollment at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, on what's called Beds Day, which is like a date in early October, where a lot of the official information is gathered statewide, so it's all done on the same day. It could be that day. Does it include all of the kids going to BOCES and other private schools? Does it not? Does it include kids from other districts that might be attending here? Do all the kids get weighted the same? In different reports that the state ed department does, not all kids get are given the same weighting. Especially when you're talking about dollars per student, because they say, well, a special ed student costs a lot more, so we're going to give them a higher weighting than what they still call a regular ed kid. So the numbers really are it's very convoluted with that. Now, one way, I suppose, to look at it would be, well, take the total budget and the enrollment, right? And enrollment in the schools. Divide the one by the other. Okay. Even that's got some limitations because, one district might have, have done a big bond recently, right? And they have the debt service payments. Another district might not. Maybe their buildings are falling apart, but they haven't put any money into it. So, and they'll show up, they spend less. However, for the 24-25 school year, current year that we're in, if you were to take just the budget divided by the enrollment as of when the budgets were adopted last year, last April, and just divide the one by the other, with these districts that are on this list here, we're a little higher than Comac, but this is very close, and also Half Hollow Hills. The three of us are very close to one another, and I think for this coming up year, in fact, either Comac or Half Hollow Hills, or maybe even both of them, might even move ahead of us a little bit, because they had their huge health insurance increase, actually last year and the year before. So now we're having ours, and that's going to cause some other. So I think that's all kind of evening out.
And as I mentioned before, if you also need to look at some of these things, and it breaks it down as far as the staff seniority lists, how the number of years of experience that your staff has in the district. We have a very highly experienced staff. Over 55% of our teaching staff is at 28 years of experience or more. So once, as Jeff has mentioned multiple times, once some of those retirements start to come in, we're gonna swing the other way, and the newer staff coming on board will probably drop a lot of those costs, and those expenditure numbers will vary. Then, for those other districts, as their staff starts to age, they're going to surpass us. So it's this constant ebb and flow that's going on. And it all depends on the origination of the district and when the people were hired. For us, it's 1966, and it's every 30 years. We're going to keep seeing this up and down, up and down, up and down until forever, until everything goes through. But other districts are a little different than that.
Yeah, some districts saw that in the early 90s. We were more mid-90s. So in 1991, there was actually a state aid reduction in the middle of the year, that year. And there was a lot of, excess teachers back then. It was the same kind of thing back then that there is now with schools. Like, my God, my taxes are so unbelievably high. Yes, they are. And a lot of that has to do with such a senior staff. And it was the same thing, 30 or so years ago. Such a senior staff of all of those teachers that had been hired in the early to mid 1960s. Then they all retired, and then it started to even things out a little bit. So, and we'll be seeing that in a few years. I think within the next 5 or so years, we'll have.
Gary said this morning, next 10 years, by 2030, 180 teachers. In the next 10 years, it'll be close to 350 potential retirements. That's first eligible. That doesn't mean
That
they're
doesn't
going
mean
to
they
retire.
are retiring, but a number of
That's
them
just the
will.
teaching staff.
Yeah. And not that, we're trying to, we don't want all of our teachers to retire. However, if we're talking dollars and cents, well, it would open up tremendous, and good for them, well-deserved, they can retire. But then it generates tremendous financial opportunities for the district too. Because there's a big difference between a retiring teacher salary and the replacement salary. So, the whole brain drain and all, I understand all of that. But if we're talking dollars and cents, it's a lot of money. Any other questions about per pupil spending, that kind of stuff?
I got it, Brian. I'm just going to leave that.
Where'd Kevin go? You send me a text, get my stuff. I'm waiting outside. And then the other item, area I wanted to discuss with you tonight is transportation. That's one of the handouts as well. So all of our students are eligible for transportation. That was something that the community voted on back in either 2016 or 2017, I forget which. We used to have a limitation. It was elementary school students had to live at least a half mile, junior high school 3/4 of a mile, high school 1.5 miles. And there's some people that live in the S section who go to Murphy that lived within that. That was the main driver of this. Live within that 3/4 of a mile of Murphy and had to cross Nichols Road. And that's, that no matter how you look at it, that's not a good situation to have, junior high school kids having to cross Nichols Road. And there is a provision that the state has to establish what they call child safety zones, to say, okay, even though for this area it's less than whatever the mileage requirement is for to be eligible for a school bus, because of the inherent danger of this particular location, it can be excluded from that. Nichols Road doesn't qualify. So, there's a whole formula that has to be followed. I could have done it myself. I didn't even want to be the one to go and do the grading and all of that. We hired an independent person, somebody from BOCES, who's a retired transportation person, who does this stuff all around the state. So it was not, anybody like me or anyone else to say, well, you graded it so it would qualify or wouldn't qualify. And it didn't even come close. So that'll tell you about those child safety zones, how dangerous a stop must have to be, that crossing Nichols Road didn't qualify. But that was one of the biggest the pushes to do that, have that vote to extend transportation to everybody.
So therefore, if the community or this committee wanted to say, from a transportation standpoint to the board, it would have to go back out to the community for a vote again to change that. It's not something the board can do unilaterally. The community has to vote as a whole in order to change that.
Right. Just like the mileage for the non-public schools, that 15 miles, that would have to be approved by the community. I'm sorry.
Quick, so is that a referendum that's put on to the ballot?
It could be, yeah, it would be, or if it was done at the same time as the budget vote, it would be a separate proposition.
And that's what it was the last time.
Right.
And it's binding more so than a board vote?
Well, the board can't say
There's no
we're
authority to do it.
changing, right.
Board has to go to the community for a vote. That's the state law, so.
So what happened in like, for example, Middle Country and Sachem, I'll just use them as an example. I don't know, but I'd be willing to bet what happened in those districts. There were enough parents of schools like St. Anthony's, maybe St. John the Baptist, maybe a number of them, where they got together, they did a petition, got enough signatures, where the board had to put it on as a separate proposition with the budget vote, and it passed. And then that's that. It doesn't matter if the board or the district said, we don't want to do it, doesn't matter. It was enough, I don't know off the top of my head what the number of signatures on a proposition is for, it has to do with how many people voted in the last election, how many signatures would be required on a proposition, on a petition to have a proposition added on to the budget vote. But like I said, I don't know, but I pretty much guarantee that that's what happened there. Those parents, they all got together, they said, let's get this, just enough of them signed it. It went on the budget vote as a separate proposition, and they came out in droves and voted yes on it, and it passed. So, and like I said, that's that now. So we haven't had that, so that's why we don't go more than the 15 miles.
Probably a dumb question, Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
When you're talking about the mileage from the school, you're talking the way the crow flies. They're drawing a circle,
No,
Or
it's.
are they doing
it's
from-
a way you would drive.
the way you drive. So if
Yeah.
I live, okay,
Like not the
Like I said,
crazy
probably dumb
way
question.
to go,
Yeah.
not, if I'm driving from here to Mount and I go by way of passing Arrowhead School and, yeah.
But
yeah.
but that's a very good point, though, Brian, because that also is applicable when we talk about the McKinney-Vento Act, which is the Homeless Act. If a child's homeless and goes to another district, we are federally required to transport them 50 miles by how they drive, not by how the crow flies. So the bus route to get there has to be 50 miles, however it gets it. So it has to take whatever winding roads to get there. That's applicable there, too. So, and we do have homeless students from Three Village and other districts, and we are already transporting them. Some cases, it's, an entire family at multiple levels, so we have to send 3 different buses to go get them. So that's a federal requirement. We have no way of getting around that one either.
And usually what we'll do is use like Google Maps. Say, start here, go to here, and go by that.
Quickest route.
Yeah, so. So all of our students are eligible for transportation. When we made that change, it wasn't an enormous cost. It was I think we only had to add 2 buses at the time, because it was the kids living closest to school, were the ones impacted by it. And so pretty much every one of those kids anyway, a bus was passing their house or close by anyway. So it was just getting them onto those buses. So I think we only had to add 2 buses at the time to do that. So our district is 22 and a half square miles in total, which creates some unique transportation challenges for us. For example, in the southern end of the district, the roads are more flat, wider sidewalks. The north, especially the northwest part, the roads are narrow, windy, and no shoulders, let alone sidewalks. So we have some buses that will, in certain parts of the district, stop at a bus stop, 20 kids will get on, it'll drive a half a mile, stop, 20 more kids will get on, now the bus is more or less full, and it goes to school, drops the kids off. And then we have other areas where the bus will drive, pick up one student, drive 3/4 of a mile, pick up another student, drive these windy, crazy roads for another mile, pick up one more student, and then by the time there's 12 kids on the bus, that first kid has been on the bus for 45 minutes already, so then it still has, 15 minutes to get to Ward Mobile High School. So sometimes when people say, oh, I see the bus and it only has 10 kids on it. Yeah, well, sometimes that's all we could fit in the time frame that we have between the start times at the schools for it to complete its route, and then get all the way from, if it's going to Ward Melville, from the northwest part of the district, which is all the way up in the head of the harbor, to get all the way to Ward Melville High School. It's a long drive, and we know what traffic's like. It takes time. So if anybody is interested, I would, from a cost efficiency standpoint, I would put our transportation operations up against just about pretty much any other district. For the number of kids that we transport, we do it cost-wise very efficiently. And if anybody wants more information about that, I'll be happy to give that to you. So the cost increase, so we have a bus I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what did the transportation consultant find? I know he was tasked with overall looking at how efficient we were, but what kind of data was he given? Was he given the total number of students per bus?
Oh, yeah, no, they had access to our student routing system. We use a student routing system, bus routing system. That's a national company that a lot of districts all around the country use. It's called TransFinder. And that organization that did the study was very familiar with that program. And we gave them access to that, and they were able to go in there. And what they were tasked to do was, what would be the best way to change start time from a transportation standpoint? That's really what they were tasked with. And
does the system have actual data from ridership, like how many kids use each one of those buses?
Yep, sure.
Do you calculate, and does it say, not that you need names or specific addresses, but specific stops, and how many people get on and off at each one of those?
Yep, yeah.
Which changes every year, yes.
Yeah. So, I don't know, routes are pretty much the same each, because we have to cover the whole district, right? So it might mean, well, this year, that stop we don't need, because only one student got on that bus from that stop for Minnesota that year, and that student is now in 7th grade. Okay, so the bus doesn't need to stop there. It still might drive by there, though, because it's doing the same route. We have the same areas to cover.
And I think the intention of the board at the time, and Sue, correct me if I was wrong, but we presented the case of what the transportation would be if we want to change the start time. And they wanted verification of that from someone outside of Three Village. Certain board members had a connection with this particular company, had used them before with some of their studies, and said that we should use them. So we didn't pick them. The board decided that would have been the one that they wanted to use. That has been involved in some of the start time areas in some of the other parts of the nation. And they came in and they did the study and pretty much found that at one point they gave us multiple versions of, some of which increased the number of buses, some of which were on par with the number of buses we were using. I don't think there was one that really reduced any of the buses.
No, unless it had, like for instance, they had one where it had the elementary school starting early. It had elementary school starting at 7:10.
7:10 in the morning.
Yeah, so we'd have 5-year-olds having to go
Be
out
on
to
the bus stops at
6:15. 6:30 in the morning. And then they'd be getting home at 1:30. And And then there was another scenario that they had all of the, like, right now we have, for anyone who doesn't know, we have 4 tiers of buses. It's the high school, then your junior highs, then 2 elementaries, Minnesota and Neskeg, and then the other 3 elementaries. So a lot of our buses do 4 routes in the morning, 4 routes in the afternoon. That's what I say, from a cost standpoint, very efficient.
How many actual buses are provided?
Well, right now, we use 48 big buses and 32 mini buses. That's what we have right now. So one of the scenarios that they came up with, and I don't mean this as a criticism to them, because myself and our transportation director, Kathy Casella, who's been doing school transportation for more than 30 years, and our bus company, Suffolk Transportation, the big boss at Suffolk Transportation, his grandfather started the company more than 100 years ago. So his whole life has been school transportation. So we were all looking at this, and we came up with what we found the best way to change start time from a transportation standpoint, change start time without it costing, or with as minimal as possible cost, additional cost. So if you think about, right now, our earliest pickup time is about 6:10. That's about the earliest any high school student gets picked up by the bus in the morning. 6:10. Somebody might be watching and say, my bus stop is 6:08. Okay, but it's around 6:10. And that's first, and all our 3 late elementary schools start school at 9:25, right? So every one of our kids that gets transported is transported to school between 6:10 and 9:25, 3 hours and 15 minutes. So if we were to make the high school later, but not make the elementaries later, well, then it just condenses that amount of time. So even logically, you might say, well, if we're going to transport the same number of kids, instead of 3 hours and 15 minutes, 2 hours and 15 minutes, let's say, or whatever, it's probably going to need more buses to do it. And it would. And we came up with what we found was the best scenario from a cost standpoint. And we gave that to this consultant. We said, here's what we found. And they were trying to see, could they come up with something better? And one was having the elementary school start at like 7:10 a.m. Another one was have all of the elementaries, all 5 of them, become late schools. Right now, Arrowhead, Mountain Star get dismissed at 3:40. That would have been, if they pushed them all back, all 5 of them now, to 3:50 dismissal, then they could have done moved the start time back, but now you're pushing them later, all right? So it's just moving everybody a little later than they are now, and that would have still required some additional buses. So it wasn't that they couldn't do their job, it was basically what they did is they verified that, we agree that this way would be the most efficient from a transportation cost standpoint to do, and that's what we had brought to the board. So
we're transparent, that cost us $29,000 to come up with the same thing that we came up with.
$29,500.
So have you ever considered looking into possible dynamic busing where I know Cumming is a little different because you don't really know first thing in the morning who's going to be there, but kids getting on the bus in the evenings, how many do you actually need? Because great question.
I
would be very interested in seeing the data because I've been at the high school multiple times and I'm watching bus after bus after bus.
Me too.
And unless the kids are literally laying on the floor, there's buses with nobody in them.
Right.
And I'm like, maybe they're waiting for the later buses. So I asked some of the students, because I attend the IAB meetings, and I was like, are there more students? They're like, no. So why are we paying for buses to do nothing?
Well, so we don't have as many buses pick up at Ward Melville in the afternoon that we have bring kids in the morning for that exact reason. But it's not that it saves us money, though. Because we pay for a bus
For duration of time.
for the day, right? So if we're using a bus anytime between the hours of say, between 6 AM and 9:30 AM, or 1:30 PM and 5 PM, something like that. That's kind of like, busy time of day for school buses. If we need the bus at any time during that day, even if the bus is not doing a PM, route for Ward Melville, well, still is doing a junior high and maybe even 2 elementaries. So it's not that, well, we don't need the bus. Well, we paid for the bus because we have to have the bus for the day. So we'll use as many as we need to at Ward Melville to shorten the routes as much as possible, so the buses can then get to Jolinas and Murphy on time. This is a tight time frame, and we all know what traffic's like around here, especially if the buses have to go on 347 for some reason. So it's not that we can say, oh, well, we'll cut in the number of buses. We can't, because we need, what governs the whole thing, the start time change, how many buses we have now, and all that is, how many buses do we need at any one time? That's really what it is. And right now, or for the 3 late elementary schools, we need those 48 buses. So we need those 48 buses for those 3 schools, unless we were to say, well, let's make one of them even later, and we do 2 elementaries, then 2 more elementaries, and then the other elementary, maybe then we could cut it down. But now those people aren't going to be so happy. And just so you know, back in 2010, Mount Arrowhead and Setauket used to dismiss at 3:30. And Mrs. Lester might remember this, in 2010, for transportation reasons, we saved a lot of money, a lot of money. We cut 15 buses at the time by moving those, a little more complicated. There was a little minor changes to the high school and junior highs too. But Mount Arrowhead and Setauket got pushed back 10 minutes, and people went berserk. They went absolutely bonkers over that 10 minutes.
Yes,
right?
I was in
Remember,
another
Brian?
district and I heard about it.
So, it's not easy to change start times like that, without people just going absolutely nuts. So this is not an anti-start time change, but,
You want to just make sure.
yeah. So, we want to wrap up quick, but I'd be happy to talk more transportation with anyone.
What's the
I'll
going rate for a
finish
bus driver?
this. A big bus costs us, it's $119,000 this year, and a mini bus is about $100,000. And then it could be more depending on, is it a wheelchair van?
Hold on, can you say those numbers again?
119,000 for a big bus, 119.5 actually for a big bus, and 100,000 for a minibus for the year.
And all of the contracts are based on per diem use of the bus.
Well, we have the bus, well, we pay monthly, right? So we get the bus for the month. Like, we can't say, well, on Tuesdays, we don't want this bus, on Thursdays, we don't want that one. It goes by monthly.
use.
I suppose if we had a day when we didn't need as many buses, we could work something out with the bus company, but that doesn't happen. Every day we need the same number of buses.
If the district wanted to buy their own fleet of buses, that would be a capital expense, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
So
And then
capital
remember the driver.
Well, that's why I asked the
Yeah.
going rate for
Yeah.
a driver,
Yeah.
correct?
it could be done,
But just the initial capital expense for 48 big buses and 32 little buses is
Plus a bus yard.
25 million, give or take. So we're spending that in 2 years just on transportation.
Well, but then we have to hire the people.
But then you have to hire the
And we
people,
have
so
to have
that's,
the
So I
mechanics.
understand all that,
The
but
fuel,
what is the-
by the way, this includes fuel.
correct, but
So-
if we passed a bond and the community supported a bond to buy the buses, I'm curious what the actual cost of the personnel, the drivers would be year over year, if it would be
Yeah.
anywhere close to 11.
You know what,
almost
it'll take a
12
little
million.
time, but I can certainly
doubt
put
it.
something together on that,
Do you-
sure.
do you-
Something
Having
to
been in
consider.
districts that own their own fleets,
And these are EV buses, the
Right.
new fancy.
no.
No.
The EV buses are
Wait,
$400,000.
just wait.
Yeah, it's
Just wait till that
334
comes.
for a big and 259 for a small on state contract. And then there's an.
Oh, that's the number you're using. Oh, I
Right.
thought you
Yeah,
meant
then
the
there's
number,
nice
yeah.
CERTA grants too, so.
Yeah,
it'd
so,
be
but
less.
the initial outlay for that, remember, by 2027, all of the buses would have to be
Yeah,
purchased
have
at
to be
that
electric,
rate.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, so we could theoretically, we could buy brand spanking new diesel buses And then they don't have to be completely phased out until 2035, right?
Right.
Correct. All,
Yeah,
the
and
entire
then
fleet
after
has,
2028 or something, you
Which
can't
is-
even buy
it's-
the diesel anymore, so.
at 2035, I'm not going
Yeah.
to care anymore. Just letting you know. It's going to be the problem of the people that are living here right now for the next 13 years to try to figure that one out.
Yeah.
This is something that the government didn't pull out of her budget.
Yeah,
proposal.
I mean, there's pros and cons to that. It's not, now, oh, no, that's wrong, we don't want to do that. I wouldn't say that, but there's pros and cons. One of the cons is, now if we have additional people on, like, let's say, for instance, health insurance, right? Do they get health insurance at retirement? Are we going to be paying for, not just while they're working here, but for the rest of their life in retirement? When they work here, they're eligible to join the retirement system.
I guess that's true.
Now we have to, and we can't say, no, you're not allowed to join. If they want to join, they join, and then we have to contribute to that.
Right. Plus, you also have to remember, because we do keep a lot of our own students with special needs, the cost for monitors on some of those buses, aides to be on some of those buses, that's an incredible expense too. So it's not just, oh, we're just buying a driver. You're also going to be buying people.
Plus the
to-
maintenance and the upkeep of the buses, plus
Yeah, we'd have to have
charging the
a bus
buses.
garage.
Yeah.
And
And
they have
right
to be
now,
inspected.
if a like if one of you called me today and said, by the way, look at this, I got video on my phone, bus went right through a red light. We would call a bus company, we would have Kathy, she would get the whole video from the bus and look, and if, sure enough, we'd call a bus company, depending on what happened, we'd call and say, we don't have the driver anymore, they're gone,
Right.
the next day. If now that's a district employee, now they're a civil service employee. Whole different issue. So we
Removing them.
like to be able to do that.
Right.
Yeah,
They
that's
have-
that's
they
a
have
luxury
Section
we have in that
75
department
rights
that we
to
can't.
be removed from their
anywhere else.
positions.
Yeah, I'm just curious if over time that there would actually be a cost savings. It wouldn't be immediate,
We
but
could
it
certainly
could
do
pay for
analysis.
itself over
Yeah, I could
10,
put some
15
numbers
years.
together for it, yeah.
It'd just be good to know.
All right,
And it-
sure.
And again,
Sure.
the district I worked in prior to here was a quarter of the size we were, and had its own fleet. So, there are districts that much larger than us that have their own fleets. So,
I mean, I worked 10 years in a district where we had our own buses.
right,
Yeah.
so, and it's, like you said, it's not a good or a bad, but trying to tackle that right now with this as a separate referendum, we're trying to get a bond passed that we held off on because people were balking about their tax bill because Brookhaven screwed up the tax assessor's office, made a mess of that.
I know,
So-
we gotta put the yard somewhere.
Yeah, you had to store them
We got the
someplace.
property
We're gonna have to,
around here.
we're gonna have to buy a school, we're gonna have to buy a school from Smithtown.
But it's something, I mean, if we're spending $12 million now and they haven't updated all the buses to EVs, what's that gonna be? Is it gonna be 20 million in 5 years?
Could be.
That's,
Yeah.
Could be.
and then it
yeah.
might be very advantageous to have
Right.
our own fleet at
Yeah.
that time.
So just to finish up this slide, so for an extended bus contract, we can extend it a year at a time. It can only be at or below what the CPI, Consumer Price Index, increases for the previous year as established by the State Education Department for transportation contracts. It's done in May, we get the number in June each year. Last year, for instance, it was 3.9%. It cannot be higher than that. It could be less, but it can't be more than that,
But that's only for an existing contract,
for an
correct?
existing contract,
Yeah,
right?
So once that contract expires, it
Well,
could be a
so
20%
that's what
increase.
happens sometimes.
Yeah, okay.
So if our bus company says, yeah, we would like to extend at CPI, and 99.99% of the time, unless we have problems with that company, would say, yes, we want to extend. Because, to say, well, you know what, let's go out, let's do it's not a bid, it's called a request for proposals. Let's do an RFP, or RFP. Let's do an RFP, maybe we can get a better price. Well, here's the problem with that. So, that we're telling our bus company, no, I mean, you can submit a proposal, but maybe they submit a proposal where it's a 15% increase in cost, and they win the proposals. Well, now, we could have gotten it at the 3 or whatever percent based on CPI, but we can't now say, oh, never mind, we want to go back and do it the other way. And it's not like there's a lot of bus companies, right? There's not a lot of competition out there for them, which might lead to, go back to what you're suggesting. And you kind of have to have a bus yard in the area. So like a bus company like Veterans, I don't even know if Veterans is still open, they used to be in Valley Stream. it'd be hard for them to bid here, because they don't have a bus yard anywhere near here. So it kind of limits the competition, and during COVID, Acme Bus, or Bauman, same company, which was one of the big school bus providers on Long Island, went out of business. So one of the that even created less competition. So the actual cost last year in transportation, 11.2 million. We have budgeted this year 11.85. We're estimating an increase for next year of only 160,000. But I'm saying only because that includes, an estimate of what the percentage increase will be. But we'll need 2 fewer buses next year because of the move in the 9th grade to the high school and 6th grade to the middle schools. So that'll save us some money. If now, I didn't include yet in that the cost, the additional transportation cost for the start time change. That would be a little over $1 million for next year, additional cost, because to do that, we need 6 more big buses and 3 additional minibuses. So,
Has there been talk about what would go in order to replace that, in order to fund the start time change?
No, we're still early in the process with
We're
that.
getting pretty close, though, no?
Yeah, no,
oh,
it's,
yeah.
the biggest area would be staffing. It would have to come out of staffing, and, we've cut everything pretty much to the bare bone at this point in time and everything else.
Yeah, I mean,
And I'm sure Carmine will disagree with that. So, but, at the same time, one of the people online that can, is calling for my impeachment, can't happen, by the way. She wrote a complaint to us about the buses going through our neighborhood, that 6 buses are coming through and that, they're all empty. Well, 4 of those buses were from Smithtown. So they weren't ours. They had to use her neighborhood to go through, and they go to Smithtown. She followed one of them one day, and the police stopped it. So.
So for next week, I'm sorry.
Mr. Das.
Oh,
A couple of quick things. One, just to follow up on this idea of, getting our own buses. It occurs to me, and you were having this discussion about, we pay for buses for whatever the max utilization is, right? So if, for example, we need 16 buses because of the elementary schools, and I'm just making a number here, it's because of that. That's what's driving the cost. But I think it would be useful to take a look at, even if we don't go whole hog and say, okay, we're going to buy buses and electric buses for the entire fleet or diesel buses for the entire fleet. If we could look at that difference between what takes up that max versus what the next count is, and gain some inefficiencies, and gradually use the capital budgets to build up a fleet, it wouldn't come at a huge expense to the district all in one go. And you're able to build up some capacity and capability over time. And it's also a test as to whether or not it's feasible, right? We make a change like that for all the buses in the district. The district residents are going to have to pay, not only pay for that, but live with that decision for the next 30 years.
exactly, yeah.
But if we can run a test to see between that difference, I think that'll give us a number to play with. So if you could run some models. The second thing, the question is, and I remember this during the discussions from the last, when the start time discussion was being had, I think somebody posed a question either in a letter or, in front. And Dr. Scanlon, you had mentioned, we're required by law to provide transportation to every student. Yes.
By our proposition.
Right. But is there any law that prohibits combination of students from, let's say, the junior high and the high schools
Being on the same bus?
being on the same bus?
No.
Is that
It just
something?
means that they're so for instance, because the high school starts so early, the junior high schools, if they're going to stop, those students from the junior high schools will just be on the bus much longer. So let's say they're all at the first stop of the day, and 5 kids, 3 are from the high school and 2 are from the junior high school. Those kids that are waiting to go on the junior high school will be on the
Understood.
bus much longer.
But if they're on the bus for 15 more minutes,
A little more than that.
20 minutes? But if you can combine those schools, you're still going to reach a start time goal that's a hell of a lot better than what we've got on deck right now, and at a much lower cost point than what you've got right now.
Okay, but as I mentioned, and I'm not trying to poo-poo the idea, don't get me wrong. Let's go back to 2010, when we saved at the time, in those years' dollars, it was $1.25 million to put the three elementary schools 10 minutes later, and people went berserk. So, I agree with you, but maybe not everybody would,
Be
but,
surprised how
yeah.
parents will complain about their kids being on a bus longer.
Well, it's not even just them being on longer, it's also the idea that if we're paying all these taxes, why is my kid on the bus longer? So, that's the, like.
Well, you'll always have people complaining about something. They're going to complain about either the bus is being empty or the bus is being too full.
That is true.
I guarantee you, there's not one thing that's going to please all 20 of us sitting here.
Well,
So-
laughably, Jeff and I were having this conversation just again today, like, okay, because when we looked at the budget, they said, maximize the buses, let's put as many kids on the bus as possible. He said, in order to do that in some of our areas, the bus will travel for an hour and a half to max out the number of kids on the bus. I said, so for the high school, that means we'll have to start at 5:30 in the morning to pick everybody up to get them to school on time. So that's not going to fly,
And that's why I'm proposing, like, this idea had come up before, and I understand, why you wouldn't want elementary school kids with older children, I get that.
Right.
But to combine junior high and high buses where, it's one more stop, it might be worth modeling at some point. I understand it comes at a cost.
No, of course.
But aren't the bus routes right now based upon, for the most part, the buses being filled to capacity, even if they're not being used?
Not exactly,
No.
We have to cover all the areas. And theoretically, if there were a day when every single student decided to ride the bus, it would be pretty tight on those buses. So, it used to be a common misperception, conception that exactly as you said, we had to do. And that was never really the case. And then some years ago, the state clarified that, and then they passed legislation saying, no, you don't have to do that. You can go by kids who were riding the
Right,
bus.
or
Now-
they threw it out there that also was, if we had to do an emergency evacuation and send everybody home,
Yeah.
you gotta be able to put a seat for every kid. There's no such thing.
Yeah, no, we don't have to do that.
And
But we do have to
by the
cover
way,
all
the last time we
areas.
had an early dismissal was March of 2020. The day COVID, we shut down, so that we had to send everybody home early.
But we do
That was
have to
the last
cover all
early
the
dismissal.
areas still.
Well, hopefully you won't be doing that for a battery exploding a couple, a mile down the road. So
Hopefully
that's
not.
another
Exactly,
thought. So it seems like the limiting factor is less about the requirement to give everyone a bus, because you could provide a bus, and you have a pretty good idea of ridership.
It's
It comes
distance
down
and
to
time.
It also comes down, I think, to the contracts you have with the bus company that require you to use the bus for the entire day. Do we pay for the fuel separately, or is that?
No, it's included in
it's
that
all in
price.
Is there a way maybe there's a way for them to give us like a unused fuel credit to run less buses? Has anyone thought about trying to renegotiate is a hard term, but restructure the way the contracts are written so that they are not necessarily taking on any extra burden, they're not putting wear and tear on buses.
Remember, when
they
you
could
touch
use
the
them longer.
contract, you're going back to an
Yeah.
RFP.
Yeah.
And that's the inherent risk that you take with, you might exceed that, which, right now, just word of caution, can be done. But what Jeff is saying has been occurring in some other districts, and 15% is a low ball of what contracts are increasing by.
Right, so let me clarify a little bit how I said we pay for the bus for the day. We can have a bus we can do a 4-hour bus, a 5-hour bus, 6-hour bus, 7-hour bus, 8-hour bus. And each hour more costs a little more. So some of our buses, for instance, don't do a PM high school route, right? So instead of being a 6-hour bus, that might be a 5-hour bus, for example. So we do pay a little less for it, and partly because for that reason, now the fuel, right? They're still paying for the insurance for the bus and the driver, but because it's less fuel, we'll pay less for a 5-hour bus than we will for a 6-hour bus or a 7-hour bus. It's a little less, not a lot less. So the real savings is when we can cut the number of buses, right? So to go from a 7-hour bus to a 6-hour bus, it saves us a little money.
Which, by the way, when
Not
we
a
were
lot.
doing the analysis for the strategic plan, had we, gonna throw it out there, Sue's gonna kick me. Had we gone to the Princeton plan, the Princeton plan by far would have saved the most money, particularly in transportation, because of the way it would have been staggered for the schools of the district. And it would have been a lot more money spent on faculty and staff than it would have been on buses. Just saying, that did not fly, obviously, in the district, so, you know, I'm not gonna get up at a podium and complain about that. I'm just letting you know that that was the plan we went in with to try to favor, and the community shot that down. So, which is perfectly fine. We moved on. We moved on to what we're currently doing right now. And even more so, while we're talking about the buses, it's other programs that we're looking at with ENL being split, saving us some money. That may save us another bus with it, if we move part of the ENL population over to one of the elementary schools, which has a significantly large population.
Yeah, because now all our ENL, elementary school ENL.
Are one school.
Kids go to Mount.
So that could save another bus. With the JV sports now, most of the ninth graders, or all the ninth graders being at the high school next year, that's going to save us some money with the buses there. We're still going to need a mini between both Murphy and Jolinas for some of the eighth grade students who qualify for JV, for sports. So, you know, we might need that anyway, but it's not going to be the 4 large buses we are using right now for just the winter season, just to get kids up there. So that's a big difference in savings on that. That's a couple $100,000, if not $300,000 alone in that area. I beg your forgiveness, I do have to go to another meeting, which is a wake for one of our staff members' parent. So I'm going to step out. You're welcome to turn it over to Sue if she wants to leave with me.
Well, we'll wrap it up and then I'll be closing.
Sure.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, so next week, I want to have a draft of the line item budget for you, as well as some revenue information. And then if there's, you know, when you meet tonight, after we leave, if there's other questions you have, whether it be about this or anything else, you know, as always, you know, please, you know, send an email, let me know. And if you want me to cover anything else or someone else to cover anything else next week, let me know too. Because we have, so 3 weeks, counting tonight, 4 weeks in a row we meet. So the hope is that we'll be wrapped up, ready for you to make a recommendation to the board at the March 19th board meeting. And the board is not adopting the budget that night. The board will be adopting the budget at the April 9th meeting after that. So the board will have time to discuss and take into consideration your recommendations before adopting the budget. And we didn't do that in previous years. We should have, but, so we'll do that this year. So instead of you reporting to the board on the night they adopt it, this way they have time to think about it. And if needed, you know, we'll have another meeting, you know, if you know, we don't, not all wrapped up by then, so.
All right, so any other questions before we step out? Sure.
Just a trivial question. On the SED paper that you gave out with the different figures with the corrections on it, when the corrections are reported to state ed, do they then issue a new statement and with the corrections included?
Well, I don't think the errors were on the state ed department.
I'm sorry?
The errors were not on the state ed department.
I know. So and do you think no one calls them and says, hey, you got some errors here?
No, that's not where the errors were.
Oh,
It was in an interpretation of their data.
this is the one, okay.
Yeah.
So say that again, okay? They're reporting
Well,
that a
that's
certain
like if
figure, and
you
you're
take-
saying that's
if you-
not correct, and I'm just like,
No.
Okay.
So this one here.
Right.
Right, if you compare, this is from the state
I'll
ed
get it,
department.
I got it, okay.
To this, the numbers on here are incorrect
Yeah, okay.
compared to that. That was the.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so I would just say, circle back, any questions, put them in an email that everybody sees, and we'll see you very soon.
Next Thursday, I think.
I think I'm right after the board, yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
next Thursday.
All right, thank you, everybody. Feel free to stay as long as you wish.